If you're a beginner trying to break down your birth chart for the first time, I know it can seem super overwhelming. Even for seasoned astrologers, there's a lot to learn all the time. In today's video, we're going to be covering one of the ways you can start to break down your birth chart in a much simpler way with the quadrants and the hemispheres. Hola my beautiful lotus flowers, welcome back or welcome to my channel. If you're into nerding out on everything astrology, spirituality, and self-transformation, this is the community for you. If you've never been introduced to the idea of quadrants and hemispheres, when you look at the birth chart, we have 12 houses total. It's like 12 slices of pizza on the birth chart, and it can be broken further down into quadrants and hemispheres. We have quadrant 1, 2, 3, and 4, and each quadrant means something different. Then we have the northern, eastern, southern, and western hemispheres, which also means something different. And the way that we identify what they mean in general for you is if you have a collection of planets in certain hemispheres or quadrants, it can tell you a certain theme that you have in your life. Before we talk more about the quadrants and the hemispheres, I want to go ahead and tell you about empty houses. Empty houses are something that seem to worry and perplex a lot of people who are first looking at their birth chart and first learning about astrology as well. They think, does that mean I have like no energy present in that area of life, etc.? But really, it doesn't mean that at all. We actually have a little bit of every zodiac sign within us. It's just certain zodiac energies are amplified based on where our planets are at and which houses are being emphasized. So if you have empty houses, they still have a ruler. You just simply have to look at what zodiac sign is on the cusp of your house if it's empty. And I'll have like a little diagram here to hopefully help showcase what I'm talking about. If you have no planets in a house, the energy that's present there is going to be primarily ruled by the zodiac sign that is on the cusp of that specific house that's empty for you. And to get a better idea of what type of energy may be present in that area of life for you, then you can refer to that zodiac sign's ruling planet and see where that is at in the chart as well, because that might be able to tell you a little bit more about your empty house also. And if the idea of the houses confuses you, definitely go back and watch this video of mine, because this video will be really confusing if you have not studied the houses at all. The houses in general can be pretty confusing for a lot of people, and it's understandable. A lot of people are kind of mystified by them. So I really break it down easily for you in this video, so please go watch it before watching this video. As for the rest of the video, we are going to start off by talking about the quadrants, and we're going to talk about each quadrant and what it means for you if there are planets present there. And then we're going to finish the video off by talking about the hemispheres and what each of the hemispheres means specifically as well. Now let's go over what each quadrant means. First, we have quadrant 1, which can be otherwise considered the drive quadrant. This quadrant contains houses 1 through 3, which are considered the self-development focused houses. The first house is considered the house of self and is ruled by Aries and Mars. House 2 is considered the house of possessions, ruled by Taurus and Venus. And house 3 is the house of communication, ruled by Gemini and the planet Mercury. It is because of these specific houses being in this quadrant that is considered the drive and self-development quadrant. These are considered the most personal houses that reveal the most about us and our own identity apart from everybody else, like our interests, things we identify with, how we carry ourselves, express our personality, etc. Having a focus of planets in this quadrant means that you'll have a lot of self-drive. There will be a very inherent independence to the way that you live your life, not really wanting to rely on other people to live your life. And it also means that there will be a theme in your life of a lot of self-discovery. You'll do a lot of self-reflection and try to learn more about who it is you truly are to your core in this lifetime. Because of this, people who have a lot of planets in this quadrant may also struggle to see other people's perspectives just because they are so independent and sometimes so self-focused that they kind of just have a blind tunnel vision going on towards their own lives. Like they're so worried about filling their own cup, they kind of sometimes may not stop to see everybody else's cups and make sure they're filling theirs and understanding where they're coming from as well. Not to mention there may be a subconscious fear present in this person. When it comes to losing their independence, they may have a fear of being like too codependent, and this may make them prideful in a lot of ways. For example, in a relationship, they may struggle to kind of give up their prideful side and reach compromise, or even in any relationship really, they might struggle to do this because they have a subconscious complex regarding being able to handle things on their own, having their own set of beliefs, and really being authentic to who they are. But they do need to be able to find the balance between understanding and compromising with other individuals, especially those that they're close to, versus focusing solely on what they want and what they believe in. So if you're somebody who has a heavy focus on quadrant 1, again, meaning that you have a lot of planets within this quadrant, then it may mean that you need to spend a lot of time by yourself to self-reflect and for self-care. Because keeping in touch with yourself and not allowing yourself to lose your identity and not be authentic to who you are because you're letting everybody else's opinions get to you, this will probably drive you crazy. So it is really important, in order for someone with quadrant 1 focus, needs to take time to themselves and really make sure that they are working on discovering who they are and what they truly want in this lifetime. Otherwise, they probably won't feel very fulfilled. Second, we have quadrant 2. The instinct quadrant. This quadrant contains houses 4 through 6, considered the self-expression houses. House 4 is the house of home and family, ruled by Cancer and the Moon. House 5 is the house of pleasure, ruled by Leo and the Sun. And house 6 is the house of health and service, ruled by Virgo and Mercury. These are considered the other half of the personal houses, just like houses 1 through 3, because they place emphasis again on the individual self, specifically your own self-expression. And this is primarily because we have the Sun's house, house 5, in this quadrant, bringing this person's creative expression to the forefront, versus the quadrant 1 that had houses 1 through 3 is very focused on the person's internal journey with the self. Because this person has a focus on the Moon's house and the Sun's house in the same quadrant, they are going to be very focused on self-expression, but there's going to be a lot of emotion behind the way that they express themselves. A lot of times this person may find that they're very emotionally complex. They feel very complicated. Maybe a lot of times they don't really know how they should be expressing themselves, because the Sun and the Moon represent very opposite things, but yet they complement each other, they complete each other. So if this person can find a balance between their emotional complexity and figure out how to channel that into creative expression or into some form of expression that makes them happy, then this is really where they're going to find the most fulfillment in their life. And because we also have house 6 in here, which is ruled again by Virgo and Mercury, this is a house that focuses a lot on health and service. A lot of times this house is having a focus on this house is going to mean that you focus a lot on how you can serve others as well. So once again, there's a lot of emotion in this person, and they really want to make sure that they are compromising with others, whereas a quadrant 1 person would struggle with compromise. A quadrant 2 person is somebody who wants to find that compromise with everybody, but they have to be careful that it doesn't turn into some type of people-pleasing complex, because it can if there is a heavy focus in this quadrant. With that being said, this person may struggle with being overly selfless to the point of extreme exhaustion. And it is extra important that if you have a heavy focus of planets in this quadrant, that you're making sure that you're keeping healthy boundaries with others and keeping time to stay aligned with yourself. Third, we have quadrant 3, the thinking quadrant. This quadrant has houses 7 through 9, considered the self-expansion houses. House 7 is the house of partnerships, ruled by Libra and Venus. House 8 is the house of transformation, intimacy, and the occult, ruled by Scorpio and Pluto. House 9 is the house of philosophy and travel, ruled by Sagittarius and Jupiter. Unlike the personal houses 1 through 6, we have now moved into the territory of the collective houses, houses 7 through 12. This means that quadrant 3 individuals have more of an emphasis on their identity in the world and society versus being more focused on their home life and themselves. So this person will want to explore the world more and develop themselves by doing so. Because we have 2 houses out of the 3 houses in this quadrant that are focused heavily on expanding the mind and learning new things, house 7 and 9 specifically, this means that quadrant 3 individuals have more of a focus on their identity in the world and society versus being more focused on their home life and themselves, like the quadrant 1 and 2 might have been focused on. Oftentimes, this person is going to carry themselves very intellectually through the world and have a very intellectual-like position. They often will want to learn new things, explore, and really expand their horizons is a huge, huge, huge theme for this quadrant. And a lot of celebrities have a focus on this quadrant or in the 4th quadrant, which we're about to talk about. But the best way for someone to move forward in life that has a focus on this quadrant is to be able to really find a way to learn and feed that desire for knowledge. So finding maybe a mentor or somewhere that they can learn from, or even just some way to explore the world more is going to make them the happiest. Because again, these are all houses that are very focused on the mind and learning and expanding horizons. Even house 8. A lot of the house 8 influence has a very psychological influence on the person. They might be very interested in like detective work or figuring out the psychology of people if there's a heavy planetary focus here. So this person may also naturally have an interest in psychology and will want to learn a lot from other people and about other people, and finding those good partnerships, since we do have the house of partnerships in this quadrant, will often be very important to this person as well. But this person does need to stay wary of the fact that they may lose themselves in the identity of others because they're so focused on learning from other people, taking in what they can. And because we aren't in these self houses anymore, we're on the collective houses, they may be too focused on the collective's opinion or the collective's knowledge rather than learning for themselves. They just need to make sure that they're keeping their self-identity apart from the world around them. 4th, we have quadrant 4, the being quadrant. This quadrant has houses 10 through 12, which are considered the self-transcendence houses. House 10 is the house of social status and career, ruled by Capricorn and Saturn. House 11 is house of friendship and humanity, ruled by Aquarius and Uranus. House 12 is the house of the subconscious, ruled by Pisces and Neptune. This person will naturally want to bridge the gap between their conscious ego self and their unconscious spiritual self in order to fully realize every part of who they are and the meaning behind their existence. And because we have houses that are considered the collective houses that are very focused on more of the public eye, they will want to figure out a way to do this and oftentimes serve the public by doing so. They are often concerned with the matters of the world regarding the bigger picture and how they can contribute to the world by looking at the bigger picture. So a lot of times these people aim to become some sort of like activist or healer. All of these traits stem largely from the 11th and the 10th house. So again, like I said, you'll find that a lot of celebrities have a focus in here. We also have the midheaven in this quadrant, which says a lot about your career and your life purpose. So that's another reason we see a very public emphasis on people who have an emphasis on these houses. Because of that 10th house influence, again, this is the house of social status and career, this person often feels that they have a message to share or some type of contribution to make to the world. A lot of times they'll turn this message or contribution into a career as well. And because this person has a focus on the self-transcendence part of the houses, we see somebody who really doesn't care too much about being very unique or having a very unique thought process. This person will probably think very outside of the box and will kind of move to the beat of their own drum. And a lot of times because of that, they'll have a very unique career. They'll have kind of an unorthodox career, if you will. Unorthodox. they can see a vision for themselves that they really want, and they can see what their purpose is a lot of times, or they're aiming to see what their purpose is. And once they have a vision or a dream intact, they really go for it and they don't really care what people have to say. However, because this quadrant is so focused on that bridge between the ego and the more spiritual subconscious self, there may be a difficulty when it comes to blurring those lines and bringing the two together. So this person may either focus way too much on like the spiritual end, may focus way too much on the egotistical end, such as getting too wrapped up in public opinion, or just focusing way too much on society and the world, like getting way too worried about what's going on in the world, because again, this can be a very humanitarian quadrant. So this person can find that they are very humanitarian in nature. So with that being said, they may focus way too much on what's going on in the world and may lose themselves in worrying about that rather than focusing on their own path and how they're going to contribute. Or they may see a vision on how they want to contribute, but then they get lost because they see something that's happening in the world that discourages them. So they just have to be sure that they are making sure that they're able to bridge the two and keep a balance and not get too wrapped up in what's going on in the world. If you're enjoying this video so far, be sure that you are not forgetting to give me a quick like. It helps me reach so many other people just like you, please. And hit the subscribe button and the bell for more videos. And make sure you're leaving a comment down below about which quadrant or hemisphere you think you have an emphasis in. And if you want to comment now because you know now you can, or if you want to wait till the end of the video, just don't forget to comment. Next, let's talk about the hemispheres of the birth chart. First, we have the Northern Hemisphere, which are houses 1 through 6, considered the personal houses. A focus of planets here impacts how we focus on developing our own identity apart from everybody else. Oftentimes, these people lean towards being more like introverted or introspective and may tend to be more private, having a natural desire to just kind of do things on their own, like creating their own hobbies and kind of just spending time getting to know themselves. It's very similar to people who have emphasis in quadrant 1. If there is an emphasis to houses here, this person is probably a bit more low-key about the way that they live their lives, and they're probably more focused too on the happiness they feel in their home life versus trying to make some type of public statement in the world or anything like that. As a result, they'll often feel most fulfilled spending time with themselves and just having a lot of time to chill alone with their own self, or spending time with really close people like intimate relationships, family, or really close friends. Second, we have the Southern Hemisphere, which has houses 7 through 12, considered the collective houses. Because the planets fall into the area of the chart that focuses more on public status, humanity, and partnerships, this person will usually place more importance on the more social areas of their lives. I don't really like to break the hemispheres into who's going to be introverted versus extroverted, and I don't want to say that somebody with an emphasis on the Northern Hemisphere will be more introverted than someone with an emphasis on the Southern Hemisphere, because I don't really think that that's true. I think it's more fitting to say that somebody with a focus on the Southern Hemisphere, houses 7 through 12, is going to be somebody who's more focused on worldly events and public things. So even if the person is introverted, they might be someone who watches the news all the time or is constantly on social media, things like that. Whereas somebody who has an emphasis on the Northern Hemisphere with the personal houses, they probably aren't going to care very much. They might be completely off social media, they might not watch the news, or they really won't have a public presence at all. Whereas an introvert that has an emphasis on the Southern Hemisphere will probably be more concerned about public things. With that being said, this person is going to find the most satisfaction in their life by exploring the world and with their external relations. So this person, even if they are introverted or extroverted, whatever you consider yourself, if you have an emphasis on this hemisphere, you're going to probably have a natural desire to somehow seek knowledge in some way, or maybe even explore the world, or you're going to want to learn from people, learn through your experiences. You won't want to sit in a shell at home. You're going to want to learn by doing things. Next, we have the Eastern Hemisphere, with houses 1, 2, 3, 10, 11, and 12. This is considered the I-focused hemisphere. This hemisphere involves a lot of houses that place emphasis on not just the person's individual identity, but also the expression and action they put behind their identity, often being a very free-spirited person who expresses themselves freely and does whatever they wish to do. Because they do whatever they wish, they'll naturally be very self-reliant and very focused on creating things on their own, but especially in terms of career. So the Eastern Hemisphere shows us how the hemispheres really separate themselves from the quadrants. Paying attention to where you have planets in both is important, but quadrants we focus on very small sections of the houses, and it gives us more of a detailed theme in our lives, whereas the hemispheres give us a more generalized theme of our lives, and it can combine the houses. So if you're kind of confused because you were listening to the quadrant section and you have a focus of houses in like quadrant 1 and a focus of houses in quadrant 4, and you were like, okay, so how am I focused on self-identity but also have a lot of planets inside of the quadrant that says I'm focused on the public? This is how the hemispheres really help explain that. So with that being said, the Eastern Hemisphere is our first example of that, where if you have a focus of planets within the Eastern Hemisphere, you're going to see that you are very focused on discovering yourself and your self-identity and being authentic to who you are in the world, but there's going to be an emphasis on the world part. You're probably going to express who you are to the public in some way. You're probably going to look to make a career out of who you are, maybe like an influencer or something. But because you are so independent and often very driven when it comes to this hemisphere, then you may find that you have a hard time asking anybody for help because you may be overly self-reliant. It can be out of pride because you just feel the need to put everything on your own back and prove yourself that way, or it can be because you're just worried about burdening others. Again, this just gives us a generalized theme. The hemispheres and the quadrants don't specify very specific things. That's what the planets are for. But it does give you a general theme. So that's why I'm kind of giving you a few ideas on what the hemispheres and the quadrants might mean for you. Fourth, we have the Western Hemisphere, containing houses 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and 9, and it is considered the U hemisphere. People with an emphasis on the Eastern Hemisphere were considered highly self-motivated to a point of almost being pridefully independent. So those with a Western Hemisphere emphasis tend to thrive and find more motivation through other people. This is because there are many houses on this side of the chart that focus on relationships and serving others, such as the 4th house, 6th house, and the 7th house. If there's a focus on this hemisphere, this person will be highly observant and understand how to take care of other people, and this can channel itself as somebody who's a natural leader, or this can channel itself as somebody who's just very nurturing in general, or maybe both. This is actually the way that this person finds the most fulfillment in their lives and really learns how to develop themselves is through their interactions with others. Again, this hemisphere has an emphasis on the self-identity houses and the collective houses. We might see a combination of those two again. So this person will be very focused on others, but they may be doing so in a way that they want to teach other people. They want to create groups. This might be somebody who wants to create like-minded groups so people feel heard or seen or taken care of. Maybe they'll, I don't know, for example, maybe they'll create some type of charity that serves a specific group of people that haven't been heard or are undermined by society. But the person with the emphasis on this hemisphere, because of this, will definitely need to tone down their receptivity to other people's emotions and needs to make sure they're taking care of themselves sometimes, because they can easily become way too selfless to the point of self-detriment. So if you have an emphasis in this hemisphere and you notice that you may lean towards being a bit too selfless sometimes, be sure you're not neglecting your own needs. So I completely forgot to film my outro. So be sure that if you enjoyed this video, you again give it a like, and then be sure to comment earlier, like I said, about which quadrants and hemispheres you have an emphasis of planets in, if any. And be sure to also subscribe and hit the bell so you don't miss future videos just like this one. You can also hop over to the LaBlue Lotus Facebook community where we talk more about using astrology, spirituality for self-transformation. And if you want even more content, you can head to my Instagram at Marisa LaBlue, and you can watch these videos to continue your astrological and spiritual learning journey. And until I see you in the next video, thank you again so much for being here. Until next time. Adios.